Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, October 24th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the retirements in the House of Representatives, specifically focusing on the fact that the Democratic Party is now outpacing the Republicans in overall retirements, which is very different from where the House and Senate retirements stood just 6 months ago. Back then, the Republican Party actually had more set retirements than the Democratic Party in the House and, of course, in the United States Senate, in which 0 Democrats have announced that they are choosing to retire ahead of those Senate elections. So when you take a look at headlines such as this one, something certainly has changed. And if you want to take a look at the most important thing that has changed from 6 months ago versus now, it has to do with President Joe Biden. Now, if you take a look 6 months ago, which was around the February time period, you will see that pretty much the approve and disapprove, or actually March-April time period, pretty much it has been very consistent. I mean, the only time it really got closer was at the end of July and early August. So throughout the entirety of the presidency, you had seen for the first 6 months that the approval rating was above the disapproval rating in many instances by double digits. And that was the case 6 months ago. So when you took a look at that list of those who were choosing to retire in 2022 back then, of course the list was going to be less for the Democratic Party because they were more hopeful about how 2022 might unfold. But with 2 new retirements, Democratic Representatives Mike Doyle and David Price announcing that they will not seek re-election, adds on to the number of House Democrats that are completely retiring from office altogether, and also those who are choosing to retire and run for future office. Now, sometimes the running for future office may not necessarily indicate that the race itself that this House of Representatives incumbent thinks they're going to be in will be a bad race for them. Sometimes people may choose to run for Senate or governor, but also there are cases where if someone is being drawn out of a certain district, for the case of Adam Kinzinger in the state of Illinois, he is saying that he will now look to options beyond the House of Representatives, including the Senate race and governor's race for 2022, because his House district is being drawn away, and the Republicans will no longer be able to win in his newly drawn district. But let's go ahead and take a look at 2022, looking at the incumbents who are not running for re-election. Like I said, the United States Senate will always be lopsided against the Republican Party, simply because Democrats have already announced all of their incumbents will be running, with the exception of one. So in the best case for Republicans, it would be 5-1, and in the worst case for them, they actually would see the addition of Ron Johnson and Lisa Murkowski to this list, making it 7-0. But moving on to the House of Representatives, it says here that those who are not seeking re-election to the U.S. House seats, these are not including vacancies and those who decided to leave early. There are 13 Democrats and 9 Republicans. Now, the number that actually gets a little bit worse in terms of the ratio here are the incumbents retiring from public office altogether. 8 Democrats and 3 Republicans. When you have 13 Democrats and 9 Republicans ending up deciding to run for a different office, for instance, you have Connor Lamb in the state of Pennsylvania. He is a current representative. He's now going to be running for United States Senate, and he can't be on the ballot twice. So he counts as one of those not seeking re-election, but in terms of those retiring from public office, it goes down to 8. But again, the Republican Party has about 6 incumbents here that are deciding to run for public office. The Democrats have about 5. So the fact that Republicans have more seem a little bit weird considering that they have less retirements altogether. And 8-3 is never a good position to be in because eventually, as you extrapolate this throughout the rest of the campaign season, if it was to match expectations of 2014 and 2010, both red wave years, which 2022 might end up being considering the trajectory of Joe Biden's approval rating and the generic congressional vote polling data, but the point being that if you are to pretty much draw it along all the way to the end of the 2022 election season, if it was to match historical expectation, the numbers here should be about 30 Democrats and maybe about 15 or 12 even Republicans, which is why you can start to see why this ends up being so bad for the Democratic Party. And the thing is that incumbents retiring sometimes can tell you a lot about a race. If we want to go back to 2018, you can see the incumbents who chose not to retire for the United States House of Representatives. Now, I don't know if they're going to show us this. Maybe we can go ahead and just go back to the page that we were on and just adjust it so it will show 2018. Go ahead and type in 2018. But you can see here that in the United States Senate, again, lopsided against the Republican Party. But in the House, you started to see exactly how bad this was for the GOP. Nearly double the amount of Republican incumbent House of Representative members decided to not seek re-election, and more than double decided to retire from public office altogether. Now, the same thing is happening for the Democrats in 2022. But the thing is that this was a blue wave year. Even in red wave years, Democrats held out. They were able to maintain their incumbency factor, and in fact, more Republicans decided to retire than Democrats in red wave years. For instance, back in 2014, we can go ahead and take a look. 2014. Let's see if we can get there. This might be 2014. Yes, it is. You can see that the number of House of Representative members that chose to retire and chose to leave their position, actually this was to run for United States Senate, or not even run for United States Senate. 13 of them chose to run for United States Senate. 41 that actually ended up leaving. The retirements altogether, 25 Republicans. And I think this was actually the most surprising thing for me personally, seeing this, that there were more Republicans who chose to leave than Democrats. And altogether, 2014 was not a good year for the Democratic Party. In fact, it was the worst year on record for the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. Look at all of this red. And I know what you might be thinking, Democrats are typically coddled up into these urban districts. New York City is split 20 different ways. Yes, I understand that. But also, taking a look at the numbers, I mean, you can start to see just how bad it actually was. 247 seats for the GOP, 188 for the Democratic Party. Today, the number stands 220 seats for the Democrats and 213 for the GOP. So the majority of 2020 and even the majority of 2018 was nowhere near in comparison to the majority of 2014. The Republican Party had an absolute insane advantage over the Democratic Party, and ultimately they were able to really prevent Barack Obama from passing major pieces of legislation. They won the popular vote here by nearly 6 points. And keep in mind that in 2014, the approval rating of President Obama was in the negative by about 10, 11 points in 2014. So that can explain this overwhelming surge of support against Barack Obama and for the Republican Party. But if we take a look at 2010, I'm not sure if we can actually get there super easily. So let's go ahead and just adjust the link here to 2010. You can see that, I guess they're not going to show us that. But if you go ahead and take a look at the retirements of 2010, they actually are quite surprising. They don't exactly match expectations for what you might think for a red wave year. And that actually is quite unfortunate for the Democratic Party, to a point where today they stand in a position where 2022 is looking up to be worse than even 2010 or 2014 in terms of overall retirement. I guess it's not going to bring me there. We're going to have to go back. But pretty much, the fact is the Democratic Party is not doing well in the retirement game, whereas they were earlier on in this year. And even betting markets, like predicted, have given the Republican Party such a high advantage when it comes down to winning control of the House of Representatives for the past 3 months. Before, the Democratic Party was about even with the GOP in terms of the House of Representatives. Then it split probably months after Joe Biden was inaugurated. But the point being that at that point in time, everyone was more hopeful that the Democratic Party was going to be winning in this House of Representatives election, or not necessarily more hopeful. That means that, people wanted it to happen, just more so that people were more expecting the Democratic Party to do better. But now it seems to be a done deal. I think that a lot of this Democratic support here is just expecting, and they're funneling money into it simply because they think that there might be some type of last resurgence for the Democrats if the infrastructure bill passes, if things start to get better across Congress. But to be completely honest with you, as I've been saying for the past 6-7 months, even when Joe Biden was inaugurated, the GOP has this advantage and will win control of the House of Representatives in 2022. I could very well be wrong about that, but as it stands today, and as it stood even 6 months ago, even with the approval rating being high, I still expected the House of Representatives to eventually go to the Republican Party, primarily because of historical expectation. Part of returning to a sense of normalcy is that Joe Biden has returned us to a sense where the President of the United States can be unpopular and also can be popular. And thus, public resentment won't always be in the negative, and not every year will be a wave year against or for a certain political party. And that's what's going to happen in 2022. We are going to return to normal type of midterm years. Even it was normal back in 2018 when it went to the Democratic Party. But the point being that 2022 won't be all of a sudden this resurgence against Donald Trump, against the Republican Party. It will more than likely be a resurgence and repudiation of the Democratic Party in the United States House of Representatives, and this is pouring over into the United States Senate. And you can start to see why this ends up being so bad, because these retirements, if the GOP has this advantage, these retirements start to add up into seats that the GOP can easily draw out with any type of contention with those already established in Congress, and can also make it in a position where they can pretty much make it so difficult for the Republican Party, for the Democratic Party to really contest these congressional seats. If the Democratic Party does not have a sitting incumbent in a district, let's say, that is drawn in a way that seems unfair, they won't have someone in Washington, D.C. that is going to be petitioning against the seat. They won't have these 100 congressional staffers that could end up working together to combat this if the incumbents start dropping like flies. I think that this puts the Republican Party in a more beneficial position to draw certain districts in a very unfortunate way for the Democratic Party. In addition to that, even if they're not, open seats are always easier to win than incumbent seats, with very few exceptions. So the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, right now in a position where the GOP clearly has that upper hand advantage. When I take a look at the House map from 2010, I'm reminded of what even a few retirements can do in terms of the House of Representatives elections, and what an unpopular president can do to the House of Representatives. At this point in time, Barack Obama was actually disapproved of by less than an amount than Joe Biden is today. And I want you to put that into perspective. Obviously the Democrats aren't going to lose 63 House seats just because their majority isn't nearly as high as it was back in 2008. There were 255 Democrats back in 2008. Well, now there were 193 in 2010, and today there stands at 220. So obviously there will be less seats lost, but the impact of it will still be the same. Personally, I am expecting the House map to end up similar to 2012. And I only say that because I think that the Democratic Party is going to really combat GOP gerrymandering by doing their own aggressive gerrymandering, as we've already seen in Oregon and Illinois. These maps are being drawn in such a way that the GOP really has no chance at victory in many of these districts, and they are doing that intentionally because Democratic districts are being drawn out in states such as Texas and Florida. When we see expectations and we start to see initial drafts and proposals of certain maps that end up putting the Democratic Party in a very tricky position for the 2022 House elections. So, with so much against the Democratic Party today, I really think these retirements are a direct response into these incumbents being afraid, and plainly put, afraid of losing in 2022. It is very likely that many of these Democratic incumbents that we see today that are in competitive districts do not win in 2022. The ones that got lucky in 2020. For instance, we can take a look at this list and just list out for some examples that we can look back at in just 2 years from now to see if they ended up winning re-election or not. If you take a look at the competitive seats, in 2010, this was a bad year for the Democratic Party. No way around it. All of the toss-up districts, and I kid you not, every single one went to the GOP. Even though the Democrats won a trifecta, look at this. The Republican Party won every single seat that they were expected to win and every single toss-up district. Democrats lost a lot of seats here. Republicans had a net gain of 12 and flipped 15 seats. If you take a look at the seats the Democratic Party was expected to win narrowly, many of them were actually just as narrow. Many of them were just as narrow, and Republicans actually ended up winning a pretty good amount of them. But for many of these districts, let's say, for instance, you take a look at Georgia's 7th. The new map here looks like it's going to shore up Georgia's 7th, but Georgia's 6th, which went to the Democrats by 9 points, looks like it's going to become a Republican plus 16 district. Very difficult for Democrats to win there. You take a look at Illinois' 17th district, that one will probably be shored up, so Democrats don't have to worry much. And Iowa's 3rd, undoubtedly, no doubt about it, Republicans will draw this district to make it more difficult for the Democratic Party to win. Michigan's 11th, I think the same will happen. Minnesota's 2nd, we will see it split control there. Nevada's 3rd, we will see what happens there. New Hampshire's 1st, it's very possible. Republicans have sole control over redistricting. It is very likely that New Hampshire's 1st ends up being more competitive than it has been in the past, though it is very difficult just trying to change 2 single districts into a more beneficial way for one political party or another, but I can tell you right now it absolutely can happen. Many of these seats that were just as competitive don't even need to be or won't even be impacted much by redistricting, but the fact that they were close in 2020 means that they will be GOP victories in 2022. That's how these things begin to translate. That's how things start to happen in the House of Representatives. Competitive districts of the past end up being opposition party victories in the future. When you have an incumbent who is disapproved of by 7 points, you start to see the tides turn. And the tides can be told through this story of retirements, through this story of the generic ballot, through this story of the approval rating. All of it combined can make a year a red wave year, a blue wave year, or just an year for each political party. I would say 2020 was probably about even year. The Republicans lost control of the Senate, but also picked up a numerous amount of seats in the House of Representatives, but then also lost control of the presidency. I don't think it's fair to say it was a blue tsunami or an overwhelming blue wave year. At surface level, it does seem to be a blue wave year because it's the first trifecta Democrats have achieved since 2008. But keep in mind that the numbers do matter, and you do have to take a look at it from a different point of view than just the surface level. But as you start to see these retirements pile up, it sort of indicates everything that we've known so far, that Democrats are worried. and these incumbents are even more worried. Their seats, their legacies, their futures are at jeopardy here because Joe Biden is falling out of favor and they are choosing to leave the House of Representatives, pointing to the fact that Democrats likely won't do well in the 2022 midterm elections. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.